Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. You know, it really is time for change. I know politicians run on this, that was Obama's whole thing, but you got these politicians promising drastic change and reforms, and then they come in and pretty much do the same old, same old. We're still on the same path. The status quo is not only kept intact, but it's further enabled and expanded. And it's funny because we're constantly hearing the Democrats talking about how broken the system is, right? The system is broken. But for some reason, even though they acknowledge that the system is broken, they never really seem intent on actually trying something new, changing the approach. And this is an important thing. You can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. You gotta pivot, you gotta experiment, you gotta try something new and eventually land on what actually works. It's time for change, it's time for the pendulum to swing. And that's why this is the exact conversation that needs to be had. For too long, the middle class has been absolutely bled dry by overgrown, wasteful government that takes and takes and takes while giving almost nothing in return. Well, it's time to start questioning that system and opting for something new. In other words, the pendulum swinging significantly in the other direction and doing things differently. And that's exactly what Donald Trump is doing now with his latest proposal, taking his idea of tax reforms to a whole other level. It's not just no tax on tips, no tax on overtime and social security payments. He's now floating the idea of eliminating the federal tax for anyone making $150,000 a year or less. In other words, taking the tax burden off of the lower to middle class. President Trump is actually out here thinking big and thinking different. In other words, he wants to deliver real, true change and reform. Try something new because currently the system is not working, and it's about damn time. Also, no wonder the bureaucratic big government class hates him so much. But let me show you guys exactly what's going on. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright folks, so first off, take a look at this announcement from Howard Lutnick.
How about no tax on tips? How about no tax on overtime? How about no Social Security? How about all those things? These are the kind of thoughts that will change America. I know what his goal is. No tax for anybody who makes less than $150,000 a year. That's his goal. And that's what I'm working for.
I'm absolutely loving the openness to new radical ways of thinking. And you know, it's time to have a serious conversation about how taxation has not kept up with inflation. You know, $150,000 a year is not what it was 10, 20 years ago. Thanks to government mismanagement, reckless spending, and endless money printing, the purchasing power of your dollar has plummeted. Inflation has reduced your purchasing power, but if you think about it, the tax brackets haven't really changed much. It's funny how that works, right? Well, maybe it's time to start having that conversation. Maybe shifting the tax brackets upwards or eliminating the tax burden on middle income earners and below. The simple fact is people are struggling and the tax brackets haven't been updated, which is clearly having an impact on the middle class. You know, nowadays it's pretty common to hear that somebody's making $150,000, $200,000 a year and living paycheck to paycheck. And it's funny because we got these Democrats constantly talking about the cost of living crisis, but for some reason they refuse to acknowledge the most obvious solution. Let people keep more of the money that they earn. But no, of course not. They would never even entertain the idea. Instead, they just want to keep gobbling up all that money from the middle class to spend it on useless programs, expanding bureaucracy, and then act shocked and act compassionate as if they care when they read the headlines of people struggling, even making six figures. You know, in my mind, it's time to try something new, or maybe going back to what worked in the past, allowing people to keep more of their hard-earned paycheck. But again, of course, no, you can't even say those words near a big government leftist bureaucrat type because they'll react in the most predictable fashion possible. They'll probably start screeching about how reckless and irresponsible it is because apparently the only responsible thing is robbing the people blind while delivering very little in return. But the suggestion is that it's irresponsible to reduce taxes because it's going to lead to an increased deficit. Oh no. Well, you know, maybe that highlights an interesting problem. Maybe that's not a problem whatsoever. Maybe that's the best part. Because if you actually cut taxes, well, it'll force government to cut spending. Well, maybe not immediately, considering how addicted Congress is to spending money it doesn't have. But you know, eventually, they probably won't have a choice. The federal government spends more money than it takes in every single year. Trillions extra. It's a total frickin' free-for-all. Well, maybe, just maybe, it's time to start reducing the federal government's tax income and hopefully eventually spending less. No more blank checks, no more bloated agencies or endless waste. Maybe getting back to a lower tax burden and a balanced budget. But no, of course not. I guess that's a little bit too common sense. What the left continues to advocate for and calls you an extremist if you even question is total fiscal irresponsibility, frankly, fiscal insanity. And again, to what benefit? Cruddy healthcare, cruddy services, failing schools. It's a complete slap in the face. The conversation is long overdue. It's time for new ideas. It's time to ask the question, are we doing the right thing? Do we have the right approach? Or do we just continue doing the same thing blindly, walking down this path without asking questions? I don't know about you guys, but I'm asking a whole lot of questions, and I'm liking the ideas that Donald Trump is presenting. You know, like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security payments.
We're seeking permanent income tax cuts all across the board. And to get urgently needed relief to Americans hit especially hard by inflation, I'm calling for no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security benefits for our great seniors. And I also want to make interest payments on car loans tax deductible, but only if the car is made in America.
And I'm also asking the question why the corporate press seems so hell-bent on demonizing some of these ideas. I mean, look at the two first headlines that popped up on my Google search when I put in the query, Trump no tax on tips. How Trump's no tax on tips could backfire for the working class. Americans are tired of tipping. Experts say that no tax on tips could make things worse. Yeah, apparently, according to the corporate press, reducing the tax burden on working class people is a bad thing and is actually gonna hurt you, according to the experts. So waiters, bartenders, and service workers might actually be able to keep more of their hard-earned money, and somehow that's a bad thing. Yeah, give me a break. It's a bad thing for the money-addicted, corrupt bureaucrats and their elitist friends. It's time to try something new, folks, in my mind at least. And it's not just about tax cuts, it's about restructuring the entire tax system and outlook. Inflation has hollowed out wages, but the tax brackets haven't budged. The middle class is paying through the nose while federal governments are burning through money they don't even have on useless nonsense, stacking more and more debt for the coming generations. It's time to relieve the burden and put the power back in the hands of the people. These government bureaucrats are not entitled to anyone's money, and I believe a full reset is needed. A system that reflects the world that we actually live in, not the broken one that the powerful elite have established. And at the end of the day, very simply in my mind, this is about freedom. You should be able to build wealth, invest in your future, and take care of your family without government taking a massive cut. America wasn't founded on big government bureaucracy. It was founded on the idea that the individual should have the power. And if you don't start pushing back now, well, that power is going to be lost forever, because once the government expands past a certain point, well, at some point, you reach the point of no return, where the bureaucrats, the unions, and the politicians essentially control everything, and then there's no going back. So essentially, the only way forward is going backwards to a time where government was smaller, cutting down the size of government, and letting individual productive citizens pave their own paths, allowing them to work hard and thrive. In other words, it might be time for actual change. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys on this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.